All right, what is going on, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to the KC Sports Report. Michael Darcy, your host here as always, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by my friend Lucas Murphy. He's a contributor over at Inside the Royals and Blue Wings Rising, both over at Fan Nation, and he's also the site manager over at kcsportsreport.com. And it's always a pleasure to have Lucas on, and tonight's going to be a great video because I just have to go on a rant about this Chiefs free agency period. And honestly, Lucas, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts because I think the Chiefs have made some pretty good signings. Obviously, you joined me for the Juju Smith-Schuster breakdown. They signed safety Justin Reed. They've signed some good pieces, but I think overall they've done a pretty poor job of addressing all the needs. So, Lucas, what are your thoughts on that, and how are you doing on this fine evening?
I'm doing fantastic, man, and I'm glad you reached out to me to be a part of your rant. I'm excited for that. But, yeah, you know, I can agree with the fact that I think that this free agency period has been, I guess you could say, mismanaged in a way. I think that there's a lot of things that are playing a factor into that, so I don't really want to say it's super negative, and as a whole we should be completely disgruntled about it. I think that obviously you needed to sign Patrick Mahomes to a long-term contract. We understand Tyreek Hill needs to be extended. Chris Jones had to be a part of this team. Like those guys needed to get paid. And so obviously that's going to have an effect on your salary cap, and that's going to affect moves that are going to be made. Now, I think as of right now, they've made good decisions on not paying, Tyron Mathieu the money he was wanting, and we're seeing that market is playing out for him because he didn't sign that big deal with anybody yet. So I think that we're at least seeing some positivity from the Chiefs front office as far as not chasing, I guess you could say, just a name or a player. They're actually trying to make good decisions when it comes to that. Now, I do think there are other players that are out there that they could have easily gone and acquired or at least, shown some interest through some form for the fans. Am I okay with the passing of Zadarius Smith? Initially, I was excited about Zadarius Smith potentially signing with the Chiefs, but after kind of doing some more, do we need to pay that contract on a guy who is going to be 30 years old and has had back problems? I don't think so. So for him to go to the Vikings, I'm okay with. So there's a lot of things to really kind of look at, but in the grand scheme of things, there are a lot of holes on this team still. And I'll let you kind of talk about, your thoughts, but my plan, and I think what I'm seeing Brett Veach do with this kind of makes sense. Now, is it the right thing? Maybe not necessarily to the fans or, how people want it to happen, but I think it's how this front office wants this to go to create longevity for this team to go to multiple playoffs. And I'll kind of, hit off of what you say, but I think there is definitely a plan in place because I've seen that a lot on social media. People are like, oh, they better have a plan in place. Well, of course they have a plan. I'm sure they have a plan 3 years out. And so I think that they have some things rolling, and that's just kind of, my thoughts right now.
Yeah, first off, I do agree with some of the things you said. I think it's easy to say, oh, the Chiefs should have signed this guy. But when you look at the pass rushers that were on the market, Zadarius Smith made huge money going to the Vikings. I mean, he backed out of the Ravens deal and went to, I think he was making 8 with the Ravens, and then he signed for 14 with the Vikings. The Chiefs can't compete with that. And Von Miller signing a 6-year, $120 million contract with the Bills, the Chiefs can't compete with that. And Chandler Jones making $17 million a year with the Raiders. The Chiefs cannot compete with that. And I understand it's not a great market for edges. They're all aging, and quite frankly, I don't want to give a ton of money to an aging edge rusher. But at the same time, it's almost the moves that they haven't made that's really frustrating. Like, they haven't brought back Melvin Ingram yet. I don't know if he's gonna come back because they haven't even, at least to my knowledge, made any attempt of re-signing him. And if Melvin Ingram doesn't come back, I don't want to say that we're completely screwed, but we'd be screwed because the Chiefs right now are banking on the draft to fill major positions of need. And that just scares me. Like, I understand that the draft class is deep with edge rushers and receivers, but right now the Chiefs have so many different holes that I don't think that you can address them all in the draft. Like, this is going to be the most important draft class of Brett Veach's career. This quite literally could determine whether or not he keeps his job. Like, I know that sounds harsh, but we've kind of seen in free agency that the Chiefs aren't biting at a lot of these free agents. And it's not just an edge rusher. In the cornerback group, my problem is you let Charvarius Ward go, which in hindsight, that's a good move. He's getting overpaid. But the problem is the Chiefs have gotten worse at every single defensive position. They have not upgraded in any way, shape, or form. I like Justin Reed. I think he's a great safety. He's got a lot of potential, but he's not Tyron Mathieu. The Chiefs haven't upgraded or even stayed the same at any position, and that's my problem. And as Soren Petro said today on the program, in the NFL, if you ain't getting better, you're getting worse. Like the Chiefs right now, they're staying the same, so therefore they're not getting better, which means they're getting worse. And that's what my concern is, because you're seeing the AFC West completely give everything that they have to win this division, to compete with the Chiefs. And right now my fear is that you're not going to have the firepower to stay with these guys. Like, I think that your offense is going to be loaded. You got Patrick Mahomes, you got Juju, you got Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce's the best tight end on the planet. But defensively, I don't know if you have the pieces to stop a Raiders offense with Derek Carr and Devontae Adams, or in Denver with Russell Wilson and some of the receivers they have over there, and with Justin Herbert in the AFC West. Like, the Chiefs are going to be in a gauntlet in the AFC West, and I'm really concerned that with Brett Veach's lack of moves, whether or not they were big moves or not, the team hasn't gotten better while everybody else has, and that's what scares me. Lucas, what do you think about that?
Yeah, man, and that's what I completely understand from a fan's perspective. I think too, as a Chiefs fan, you got to look at it from a perspective of, we have the Kansas City Royals and we have the Kansas City Chiefs. We've had a Kansas City Royals team that's had success, back-to-back years where we've gone to World Series, and then it was basically a complete restart. The Kansas City Chiefs have been a consecutive playoff contender, a Super Bowl, an AFC championship contender, and a Super Bowl contender for years now. And so I think that's escalated and elevated the fans' expectations year in and year out. And it does get challenging because there is a salary cap. Even though people believe that there isn't one, it's imaginary. There is a salary cap, and moves have to be made to fix that. We do have to extend Tyreek Hill. People are kind of forgetting that. You have to do that. He's going to be a free agent next year. Do we really want Tyreek Hill to go and test free agency?
No.
I don't think so. So there's a lot of things that have to be done in-house that are going to allow those things to happen. We saw today Joe Thuney is kind of restructuring to help sign those guys like Reed and like some of those other guys, and that's going to help out with potentially the draft as well. There's still some moves that are going to be made. We're still very early on in free agency and in the offseason still, but a lot of things can happen. I think if you add a Melvin Ingram type of player, it doesn't necessarily have to be him specifically, but if you add a player like him, you go and you draft a very, very good, because my thoughts are they're going to use the 30 and something else to move up, and that'll still allow them to have multiple picks. We have 10 draft picks in this draft. So they'll be allowed to move up and acquire somebody that they're really, really interested, I would assume, on the defensive side of the ball. If you head over to the KC Sports Report, we've done a lot of mock draft roundups. Go check those out. There's a lot of players we've talked about, and some of the ones that are kind of specific to this situation. So go check those out over there. But honestly, man, I think that there's a lot of good talent in here that if you supplement that with a veteran, you're kind of fixing that. I also think if they add somebody next to Chris Jones, like a Calais Campbell, there's a lot of options that they still can go out and get. And a lot of these guys are eventually going to start wanting to play football again. Like, they're in an off-season time where they're like, man, I'm thinking of vacation. I'm kind of either rehabbing or I'm getting back in kind of the tune of getting to the weight room. Once they get hungry for football again, I think you'll start to see some movement again. And like a Calais Campbell paired with Chris Jones, that's scary, man. That really is. And then you add a little bit of, and I'm not saying Frank Clark is completely dead in the water, but he does still provide something. And, you get another person on the opposite end paired with a rookie. I think that is going to still be okay. The thing is we know Brett Veach does not address heavily with money, and he hasn't addressed, corners really with a whole lot of concern outside of going and testing it with former first-round picks. We've seen it with Mike Hughes. We've seen it multiple times where they've gone, like DeAndre Baker, former first-round selection. So those guys are brought in. Josh Jackson is another one. So I think that he'll address the cornerback market the way he's always addressed it. I do think that we'll see it happen in the draft. They're going to get somebody in the draft, especially if they have 10 picks. I guess my alert, or however I want to say it, I guess my meter of worry is not at full red yet, because I still think that there's so much that can happen. And I think that this team, the chemistry that this team has, they've gone to 4 consecutive AFC championships. We know how many consecutive AFC West championships they have. Like, this team has a lot going for them, where you have the other teams that have been fighting to catch the Chiefs for so long. And I think, that playing field is starting to catch up, but they still have to get past the Chiefs. We still have Patrick Mahomes. We still have Andy Reid. We still have Brett Veach. So I get the concern. I have a little bit of concern myself, but I think a lot of that will change once we start to continue to get through this offseason.
Well, I have no doubts on offense that the Chiefs will be fine. I mean, you've only improved it, and I think that if you sign back Jerick McKinnon, your offense is going to be great. But the problem is, like in 2018, the Chiefs' offense was one of the best I've ever seen, but that defense couldn't do anything, and they could get after the pass rusher. This team right now, their best pass rusher is Frank Clark, and their best DB, I think, is L'Jarius Sneed. Maybe you could argue it's Justin Reed, but the Chiefs, I just think, have so many holes, and they are banking on rookies filling those spots, and that's what concerns me, because rookies are great and all. The Chiefs hit on 3 cornerstone pieces in the draft last year with obviously Nick Bolton, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith, but that's really rare. It's not common. You don't see that every day, and I think that Brett Veach, who has a shaky draft history to say the least, I don't know if him putting all of the eggs into the draft basket is a good idea, because I think that, my mindset coming into the offseason was get an edge rusher, get a safety, get a corner, and just fill the rest in the draft. At least have that baseline. You can rely on the older guys if you need to, and the rookies can step up. But now they're going to force a rookie, possibly a 30th overall pick, to be the main contributor on this defensive line or on this defense. And God forbid they decide to take a wide receiver 30th overall. Like, we don't know what they're thinking right now, but I'm really concerned that they're not going to have the right pieces on this team. Now, that's not saying that in the next couple months they couldn't make a trade to acquire anybody. I know Danielle Hunter's been in the news recently, but then they just signed Zadarius Smith, so I don't think that they're going to get rid of him either. So the Chiefs aren't really up for a major pass rusher at this point, and I think they're going to have to bank on the draft, and that's what concerns me. But honestly, you kind of alluded to it. The free agency market when it comes to Tyron Mathieu is pretty much non-existent. Like, we've heard, the Colts might be interested in him, or maybe the Bears took a look at him, but I don't think anyone's budged. And I would not be opposed in any way of them maybe saying, hey, Tyron, we kind of did you dirty. We didn't even offer you anything. Here's like a little 2-year, $20 million contract. Come home. Come home, Tyron. Like, why would they not do that at this point? He's a phenomenal DB. I get it, he's regressing, but why would you not go out and get a all-pro caliber safety to pair with your young safety, and they already played together in Houston? Like, why not do that? What are your thoughts on that?
My only concern is that they do kind of play a similar position. I've seen a lot of people talk about it on social media and maybe letting Tyron play some of the slot, and he is getting older, and I'm not saying he's not still capable of doing that, but I think their message to him and really kind of the team is like, hey, we're turning the page. Like, he did his contributions. He helped aid in us winning a Super Bowl. We basically helped him by getting to free agency and allowing him to test the market and get the money that he is wanting. I'm a huge fan of Tyron Mathieu. I always have been. Back when the Chiefs could have drafted him, I was hoping that they would, and then he came here. But now even me as a big fan of him. I'm like, hey, we've turned the page. I'm a huge advocate for what Justin Reed's going to be capable of doing. The guy smacks you in the mouth. He tackles. He plays good. And he's 25 years old, and it didn't cost $60 million. I think that's something that you have to take into consideration. And, there's always that chance he could come back, but, he's talking to the Dallas Cowboys. I've heard that, him and Micah Parsons had a thing. There was that rumor for a long time. It was Baltimore. If Baltimore was truly interested, why didn't they sign him? They went out and got Williams. And then the Saints. The Saints went out and got somebody as well. It's like, he's interested in going these places, but something is preventing them from doing it. And I think for me, it's the money aspect. But I just don't envision him coming back to Kansas City. I think we've basically seen some of the bigger people on social media turn that page as well. And I think his time here is done. And I think they have to spend money in other places. And that's not what it's going to be. I really do, man. I believe 100% they're going to address a lot of things with the draft. And a lot of people aren't excited about that. But we do have to remember, a lot of people are interested in going and getting Josh Allen. That name has popped up a couple of times, the defensive end from Jacksonville. He was drafted from Kentucky. He started out of day one for them as a D-end. There's probably numerous examples you could go down the list. I mean, Bradley Chubb is probably another one who plays for the Broncos. I'm sure Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, like those guys have played from day one. So they're out there, and who's to say the Chiefs don't go up and draft someone not necessarily of that stature, but maybe that type that can come in and play from day one and really get after the quarterback, and then everybody's going to be like, holy smokes, like it can be done. I think we have to kind of give Brett Veach a little bit of some rope because, we've seen him hit on some pretty big stuff. Like Nick Bolton has been special. Creed Humphrey can easily be considered the best center in all of the NFL. L'Jarius Sneed, for where he was selected, the list goes on. And so I would like to at least see what he's going to do. Now, he has had some mistakes, and some of the stuff that is getting back to us is obviously the Frank Clark trade and sign. He drafted Breeland Speaks, which that didn't turn out very well, and that's kind of what's hindering us to this day. So we'll just have to see, man. I really think that there's a lot that can happen, and like I said earlier, there's a lot of offseason still left to go. Somebody could also get cut, and maybe they find their way to the Chiefs.
Yeah, and honestly, that's one thing that I will say. I love Brett Veach. I am most of the time supporting him and his decisions, and I've been frustrated with how he's handled the offseason, at least up until this point. But the one thing that I will say is that, we all kind of complain about, the Frank Clark contract's terrible, but, I think that this offseason they had that chance to make another kind of dumb decision because they were in on Von Miller, and then I think Veach is like, you're going to give him $120 million over 6 years? Yeah, Von, have fun. We don't want you. Like, I think the edge market just kind of exploded this offseason, and I don't think it played out the way that he thought it would. Now, again, that's not really his fault, but it might have been a wise decision to not sign an aging pass rusher in his 30s to a long-term extension. Like with all of these guys, like Chandler Jones, he's getting up there in age. Von Miller, Zadarius Smith, they're all aging. None of them are in their prime anymore. And so it would be foolish to give them elite-type money when, quite frankly, the Chiefs have other needs. And, they have needs, but they need to fill those needs in a cheap way. And if we're being honest, like, these guys are good, but they're not $120 million good. They're not $50 million good. And I think that Veach probably came into the offseason saying, all right, we're interested in Von Miller. We're interested in Zadarius Smith because apparently they were in on Smith twice. Before he signed with the Ravens, they backed out of that, and then when he signed with the Vikings. But I think that after he learned what these guys are going for, it just didn't make financial sense. And, you talked about it earlier yesterday or today. If I'm recording this today, but when you're seeing this, it happened yesterday. The Chiefs did restructure Joe Thuney's contract. I think it freed up like $9 million in cap space. My only problem with that, it's not with that move itself. They didn't restructure Patrick Mahomes. And that, to me, is a concern because, after restructuring Thuney, you're going to have enough to maybe re-sign Ingram. if they even do that at this point, and pay for the draft picks, and probably extend Tyreek in Orlando, but that's about it. Like, I don't know why you didn't adjust Patrick's contract. I don't think that he'd be opposed to it, but it's almost like the Chiefs had this plan, and it just hasn't really gone according to plan, and that's kind of what concerns me. So, Lucas, we've kind of talked about the Chiefs and what they need, but how important, like, what do you rank on a scale of importance? Do you have edge at the top? Do you have corner at the top? Because, as much as we're talking about the edge position, our cornerbacks right now are not looking good. Like, I don't want to say not looking good. You've got L'Jarius Sneed and Rashad Fenton, and I think those are the only two that are on roster that would be starting. I like Rashad Fenton a lot. I think he's a good player. I like him as a rotational piece. I don't want him as a starter. The Chiefs are in desperate need of some corners, and I think that's definitely a high need. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to say defensive end, edge rusher is a concern. I'm definitely going to say number 2 for me is D tackle, and then 3 would be cornerback. I think, and the reason why I put D tackle there isn't necessarily that it's a glaring need, but I think if you address D tackle with someone younger, like either of the guys from Georgia, a few others. Obviously, we talked to Josh, and he's very high on the kid from Oklahoma. I think if you really plug one of those elite D tackles in there, I think you're going to see a world of difference with Chris Jones paired with someone like that, being able to apply pressure in those interior gaps, which then allows those edge guys to not necessarily be as elite. And so that would be interesting. Obviously, D-end is still a huge need. But I personally, I like what is in this draft. I truly do. It's just the Chiefs have to potentially move up to get one of those guys. I'm a huge fan of George Karlaftis from Purdue. I think the guy is an absolute monster. And he's been kind of projected to go in that range, probably anywhere from 15 to about 20, 22. Those guys from Georgia, they've fluctuated anywhere from, the middle of the pack down to even the Kansas City Chiefs at 30. So really there's a lot of things that can happen, and I think that's the unique thing about this is as we look from the outside in, we're seeing what we can find from social media, who has the content and is able to push it out, and that's how we respond. These guys are in it, and they're doing it every single day. They know the market. They know exactly kind of what's going to happen, at least a little bit in the draft. They know what trades they're kind of flirting with, things like that. So I'm sure that this plan is going to kind of surprise us all when it happens. And, like I said, they're in it every day. So maybe they know, like, hey, Zadarius Smith, he just doesn't fit what we're trying to do for his pay rate. And so, hey, if you're willing to take that, go do your thing. Someone that's still out there that I think could be added is Larry Ogunjobi. I mean, yes, he did fail a physical, but who's to say the Chiefs, who have the best staff out there when it comes to, the physical side, they go out there and they sign Larry Ogunjobi and get him in here. So there's still a lot of things that I think can happen. And real quick to kind of touch on the Patrick Mahomes thing, Brett Veach is very, very in tune with what's going on with this salary cap. And he knows that next year that this thing's probably going to go up in the upward direction quite a bit. Now, if they keep restructuring, there's some things that could cause and hinder this team further down the line. So maybe they saw this as an opportunity to maybe just sit on Patrick's, restructure. And if they extend out Tyreek Hill, that's going to free up enough, some money. Maybe they do one other restructure, and that frees up exactly what they need, and they can keep Patrick where he's at so he doesn't really get super, super high in a salary cap hit later on in his contract. So there's a lot of things. And again, I get people's frustration. I want to emphasize that because we want them to be successful. We know that we don't want to waste any time that Patrick Mahomes has. We also don't want to waste Andy Reid's time. We know that's kind of getting limited too. So, I get it. I really do.
I mean, it's hard because the realistic Chiefs fan in me and the analyst in me understands why Brett Veach didn't pull the trigger on a lot of these moves. It's tough because I think the Chiefs have so many different question marks, and I just don't know the answer. Like, I I, for the first time in a long time, don't really have a solution to this problem. Like, I understand the draft is good. You know, the guys that you mentioned, like the Nick Boses and the Joey Boses and like the elite guys, those guys go in the top 10. So unless the Chiefs are going to leapfrog 20 spots up, like I can't see them pulling a guy like that. Now, that's not saying you can't get a quality guy at 30, but you need somebody right now that can kind of carry the load. And honestly, I think they might have to draft 2 of them. I wouldn't be against drafting 2 edges in the first 2 rounds. I mean, hell, you've got 2 third-round draft picks. Maybe you bundle those up to get up to a second-rounder, or, you know, the possibilities are going to be endless, and we'll talk about the draft in great detail. It's hard for me because I feel like the Chiefs were so close last year to going to another Super Bowl, and they have regressed this year. Now, there's still time for them to get better, but on defense, they have regressed. And when you look at the AFC West, everybody else has gotten significantly better, and that's what scares me. I think that in order to get to the playoffs and win in the playoffs, you have to have success within your own division. And the AFC West is the best division in football. That's the problem. And I think that, you know, the Chiefs still have time. I'm not completely off the Brett Veach train yet, nor should I be. But I think that you can love Brett Veach like I do and also admit that he hasn't done a great job this offseason. He hasn't done a piss-poor job, because I think that with the signings of Juju Smith-Schuster and Justin Reed, they're A signings, but when you look at the overall need and the bigger picture, he hasn't really addressed that yet. And I understand that the draft is still a possibility. It's going to be where they probably get the majority of those guys, but I just don't feel comfortable in placing the Chiefs' potential defense in the draft, because I think go ahead.
Real quick, I'm going to ask this to you, and I'm going to ask this to the people that are listening. Have you heard of Trey Hendrickson from the Cincinnati Bengals? He used to play for the Saints.
I have indeed, yes.
3rd-round draft pick. Have you heard of Max Crosby? We're pretty familiar with Max Crosby.
Just signed a big deal.
Yeah, 4th-round draft pick. So
yeah.
Those guys are out there, and that's the thing I want to emphasize. We have 2 3rd-round draft picks, I believe, and we have, granted, a lot of fifths don't pan out and things like that, but they're out there, and that's the kind of the faith we have to put in them to go find those guys. We saw them find Trey Smith in the 6th round. Should have been probably a 1st round, a 2nd round type of guy.
Well, and really quickly, honestly, the secondary might be where I have the least amount of concern, because the Chiefs have always been able to get good DBs in the later rounds, and they've been able to fill that position group out because Brett Veach has done a phenomenal job of finding guys that nobody else really finds, and it's helped this secondary go to Super Bowls. But when you look at the defensive line history with the Mike Danas and the Josh Kandos, the Breeland Speaks of the world, it just hasn't worked. And Derek Notty's another guy that they just re-signed to a 1-year contract. I think that's kind of going under the radar. And they also signed tackle Jerron Christians. So I think that they've made some moves. Christians is a swing tackle. I'm not fully on board with that. Like, it's a good move, but I think Andrew Wiley is going to be the right tackle if Lucas Niang isn't. But, you know, getting back on track, the Chiefs have shown the ability to get talent in the draft. Don't get me wrong. I mean, hell, they had the best quarterback in the planet. They drafted him. They drafted the best tight end on the planet. They drafted one of the best wide receivers on the planet. But when you look at the defensive line, I don't think there's enough evidence to show that they've had a lot of success drafting edge rushers or even really defensive tackles. Well, Chris Jones, but
I think it comes down to that's where Andy Reid is good. Andy drafted Fletcher Cox. We know Brett Veach was on the staff that aided in drafting Fletcher Cox when he was at Philly. That's where I think Andy is very good is addressing that D tackle position. So if Andy does put his foot down and say, hey, this is the guy I want, or I really like this guy, I would be willing to listen to that, especially when it comes to that D tackle position. I do 100% agree with you on the edge aspect, and I think maybe that's just because they've always tested it outside of Breeland Speaks later in those rounds. So we've saw Tano Passanha, we've seen some of the guys you mentioned and the Mike Danas and those types of guys. Although Mike Dana isn't necessarily like that flashy starter, he's definitely contributed, and that's the thing is he's not a starter, and he's a good addition to, coming in when he needs to. We need to get that stud, and they need to find that. And I think maybe this is the year. I have 100% optimism that this is the year they find that, and to go with those Mike Danas. And, we can't sleep on like Tashawn Wharton and those types of guys yet either, because they're learning the system, they're getting into it. And I think those are the types of guys you need to and will see take that next step and become something special for the Kansas City Chiefs.
And that's completely fair. And honestly, to yet again defend Brett Veach, I think Mike Dana was a 5th-round draft pick. I think Josh Kando was a 4th-round draft pick. So you could make the argument that outside of Breeland Speaks, they've never really developed or even really attempted to spend big assets in the draft to acquire an edge rusher or a defensive tackle. But I do think I wouldn't be that blown away if they traded for an edge rusher right before the draft. I think that's still very much a possibility. It's interesting because I haven't felt like the Chiefs had a ton of work to do in the draft in quite some time. Like, they're usually just kind of finding the pieces to round it out and just to find the cherry on top of the ice cream sundae. That took me a minute to think of. But right now, they are drafting for need. Like, they're going to have to pick guys in the 1st round, 2nd round, 3rd round, 4th round that are day one impact players. There's a lot of pressure on this draft. And I do think that when you really think about it, Brett Veach has done a pretty good job in the draft, specifically at getting guys when he really needs to. Like, you've seen him whiff on, I don't want to say Josh Kando's a whiff yet, but we haven't really seen anything that he can do. But, like, he's whiffed at spots that weren't huge, but you've also seen, like, in a time where they needed to draft somebody for position of need, Juan Thornhill's a pretty good safety. I think he's pretty solid, and if he didn't get injured, he'd be a great safety. Mecole Hardman is a quality receiver. I mean, when you look, I'm not going to go down the draft history again, but when you see some of the positions that they need filled, Nick Bolton at linebacker, like, they have found guys when they really need to. But again, the NFL draft, I don't want to say it's luck, but it's a crapshoot. Like, you don't know what's going to happen, and the Chiefs might have 10 edge rushers on the board, and they might all go within the 1st round. You don't know, and specifically because there's no good quarterback in this class. So, Lucas, it's been a good conversation. Really quickly, I want to get your letter grade of Brett Veach's offseason so far. Now, I said this on Twitter, and everyone kind of jumped on me. I think you can grade Brett Veach right now, and it's not going to be for the overall offseason. Some guy jumped on me on Twitter, and I almost thought about responding, well, you went to school, right? And your teachers gave you a test, and you got a grade for that test, but they didn't give you a final grade. It's just they're testing you along the way. So, yeah, I could go on for hours about that. But what are your thoughts on that? Like, what is his grade in your mind?
I'd give him I'm going to say a C+, but I'm almost, and people might blast me, but I almost might say B-. And the reason is if I honestly feel that Juju Smith-Schuster signing speaks volumes, and I think people are addressing the DN and the defense as a glaring need. Like I've said through this entire video, it is a glaring need, but we can't discredit the weapon that was just given to Patrick Mahomes. And I think that if they're going to score, I mean, that it's just incredible to think what they added, because they still have Tyreek Hill. They still have Travis Kelce. They still have Mecole Hardman as a gadget player who can do all kinds of craziness with his speed. And we saw about 5 to 6 plays that were designed specifically for him. Now you're adding a guy who can easily obtain 110 targets that was taken from Byron Pringle and Demarcus Robinson and whoever else you want to throw in there. Now that's going to go to Juju, and Juju is a special, special talent. I think that speaks absolute insane volumes to what Patrick Mahomes is going to be able to do and what they're going to be able to do with this offense. Maybe they open it up more. Maybe we see plays that we haven't seen in a while, or plays we haven't seen. That's huge. And so I think that's the reason why I'm sitting around a C+ and a B-. I also am not – I'm happy with the Justin Reed signing. I think that's big time for this defense. You're asking some younger guys to step up. You're going to have a huge step from Nick Bolton. You're going to have a huge step up from Willie Gay. They don't have those Anthony Hitchens, at least right now. Those guys are not on this roster. They are that guy. So they got to be able to step up and be that leader. And, that's what's going to be exciting. Juan Thornhill keeps saying, it's my time to shine. It's, if you see what he says on social media, well, then come out here and show us.
Yeah.
That's the thing, And so I think that is why I'm giving him a C+, B-, because I think, and again, like you said, this is a continuously grading, school type of thing.
Yeah.
It could eventually get to an A. But for right now, I'm going to say C+, B-.
I agree 100%. A lot of people kind of think he's done. Actually, a lot of Chiefs fans have complained about the lack of moves to bolster the defense. I think a C-, C+ is a pretty good grade. And I think that that's no knock on the players that he's brought in, because I think that if you're grading those two moves purely, I would give that an A, because I think that Juju Smith-Schuster is a great player to have. He's going to open up this offense a lot. And Justin Reed is a safety that's entering his prime at the age of 25. So they have good pieces that they've added. But when you look at the overall big picture and you've looked at the kind of positions of need, they haven't addressed that. And I think that's why, as of right now, as of March 22nd, by the time you're seeing this, March 23rd, I think he gets a C+. And again, he can improve that. It's just going to be how well he does in the draft, what kind of other moves he might make. And again, I'm not saying he can't make a big-time move, but we got to see it. Right now, it's just all talk. We need to see what he does. He said that the defensive line was going to be a major priority this offseason. Outside of Frank Clark being restructured and Derek Nottie returning, you haven't done anything. So I think that's going to definitely be something to watch. But Lucas, it's always great to have you on. I thought we had a great episode tonight. Where can the people find you?
Man, you guys can find me over at the Beat of KC on Twitter. And really a huge, guys, you can support a lot by going to KC Sports Report, checking out the articles that are being written over there. We are covering the Chiefs nonstop. There is an article that is ongoing right now for all those free agent moves and any type of transaction. You guys can keep up to date by just clicking on that article. It'll tell you everything that's gone on in the Chiefs timeline up to this date. We're also doing a lot of mock drafts over there, mock draft roundups, so you can see what people who cover this on a daily basis are saying the Chiefs might draft, since the draft is kind of becoming important for this Kansas City Chiefs team. So, head on over there, and that's really kind of the main places. Michael did mention in the beginning, if you're interested in KC Royals content, you can find me at Inside the Royals Fan Nation. I also cover the Kansas Jayhawks through Blue Wings Rising, through Fan Nation. Been covering a lot of football, off-season stuff since spring practice is going, so head over there and check out all that content.
Guys, Lucas is killing it on the website. I think that we're at 1,500 views, over 1,000 page readers. So go subscribe to the website. You can do that by, I think, putting your email in so you get constant updates on the articles and the podcast that we're going to be dropping soon. The Royals are starting to get good again, hopefully, so he's covering that over at Inside the Royals. And the Jayhawks are loading up to make a Final Four run right now, and maybe a national championship, which, knock on wood, that's not wood, but hopefully they do. So definitely go support Lucas. He's been phenomenal to this channel and for the brand. As for me, you guys can follow me on Instagram. That is KC_Sports Report. And Twitter is at KC Sports Report. Until next time, guys, thanks for watching.